Welcome to Oracle Fusion Hub Apex Cloud Tutorials. This is part one of the ongoing Apex Cloud tutorials. I will be posting these tutorials every week for the next few weeks. To start with, what I will be discussing in this video is a high-level architecture of Oracle Apex, how Oracle Apex fits into the overall Oracle RAD stack, and a quick demo on how to create your cloud user account and then start using Oracle Apex on the cloud. So before we go into further details on what Oracle Apex is all about, I wanted to give a brief introduction on the Oracle RAD stack. So basically, for all the web applications out there, if you look at this diagram, you would at least need a web browser that the user can interact, and then you need a web server that can process these requests, and then you need a data store that can which is like a database that can store the data and retrieve and enable the retrieval mechanisms for the data to again show it back to the user in the web browser. So Oracle RAD stack consists of three main components. One is the Oracle REST data services. Then the other one is Oracle Apex Engine. Then the Oracle database. So the Oracle REST data services, which is basically called as ORDS, acts as the web listener in the entire architecture. So it's basically a Java EE application, which is basically a web listener that sits on either on top of a WebLogic server or an Apache Tomcat, or it can be used as a standalone listener as well, but with limited number of features. So it's basically an alternative for Oracle HTTP server and mod PL SQL, which are like pretty old technologies, and they're being deprecated as we speak. Now, as I mentioned, this ORDS can be deployed on a WebLogic server and on an Apache Tomcat server. And the only difference or the only caveat here is if you go with an Apache Tomcat server, then that's basically a free server and you will get it as a free application. But if you use WebLogic, then WebLogic is a licensed product from Oracle, which involves costs. So that's something that that you need to look into when you are deciding on which server that you want to put your ORDS. And for customers who use Oracle EBS, then they already have one of them installed, and then you pretty much basically be using the same server. So what does an ORDS does? It basically communicates with Oracle database by mapping the web browser requests to the Oracle Apex engine and subsequently to the database via a SQLnet connection. So, for example, if you log into a web browser and then you basically ask for a simple login. You give a username and you give password and you click on submit. And then what what it does is the browser will basically send a GET request to something like this, to the Oracle Apex host.com/ords/r/your schema, and then your application name, and then the actual handler that it is corresponding to. So so the ORDS will basically have listeners on this URL, and then it basically takes your request and then it passes that to the Oracle Apex engine, which will subsequently get the data from different tables, for example, maybe FND users or Oracle DBA users, and then get the data and then format it, and then basically send the response back to the Apex engine and subsequently to ORDS. And then that basically brings up the result in the web browser. So that's the overall life cycle of a RAD stack in general. Of course, there are a lot of caveats when we deep dive into each of these stacks and understand more about how those requests are being processed, how the Apex engine is being talking to the Oracle database, underlying Oracle database, and then getting the results back and transferring it to the web browser, etc. But that's something that we can discuss in a subsequent tutorial. But on a high level, this is basically the general architecture on what an Oracle Apex technology altogether, so that you have an understanding of what you're getting into before we start our regular Oracle Apex tutorials. Now, setting aside the theoretical concepts of the technology, since this is our first tutorial, let's do a basic demo of how to log into an Apex cloud instance, then create your own account in Oracle Apex Cloud, so that you can get started for our next tutorials. So Oracle basically gives us a cloud platform. You can just go to apex.oracle.com, and if you have an Oracle database in-house, you can actually install Oracle Apex on your regular database. But for majority of you who are starting with the Oracle Apex, I would suggest you use Oracle Apex Cloud, which is actually an always free instance, so you don't need to pay anything to use these services. So you can click on get started for free here, and then you can say sign up for free tier, which will basically ask you to sign up an account. So you can click on, you can enter your details here, and then you also have to enter your credit card information, but that's like not chargeable. They might hold you $1 or $2 for security reasons, but you would get your money back. Once you fill these forms and all, you will have a proper Apex login created. You will get your username and password and all those details to your registered email account. And once you are inside, once you get your access, you can actually log into your Apex application, but this is not the page that you sign into your Oracle Cloud account. Once you are in cloud.oracle.com, you have different options here. What you can do is you can just go to um, the Oracle database and then click on Autonomous Database. And as you can see, I've already created a database for myself, but if it is your first time, you can create an Oracle autonomous database. You can give a compartment name, the display name, the database, and then when you choose the workload type, please choose Apex because that would give all the basically all those features. And then make sure that you select always free because if you don't select, then you might be billed at a different rate and all. And it would actually, if you don't select, it would show a lot of different options which are actually billable. But now when you select always free, then you won't see a lot of the features that are meant to be for not always free customers. So you can select always free and then um, you can create an administrator account and give the rest of the things and then click on create autonomous database. Now, once you do that, then a database will be provisioned for you and the status will eventually be changed into available. Now, you can open the database and then you can go to the Apex instance here, which just says this one, and then click on the Apex instance, which will redirect you to the Apex config pages. Now, when you are inside this, what you can do is you can launch the Apex, which would, if it is first time, it would show a register user password details and all. So you can click on those and log into the Apex Cloud application. Now, once you are in it, then you can actually start working on your Apex Cloud, Apex tutorials and how to create new applications and all. But that's pretty much it for an introductory session on Oracle Apex Cloud. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let's meet next week. Thank you so much.